student was someone that you felt like had their post-secondary plans completely figured out, okay? Fast forward 5 years, maybe even 10 years, and you run into this student at Walmart or wherever, and you learn that those plans for that student didn't actually pan out. And that's what you see here. This is where those 2012 graduates actually landed. And when you think about your graduate or the person that came into your office, the student that you're imagining, where do they fall on this chart? So this report provides a view of the degree or credential attainment and median income of that class. We're not talking about students anymore. We're talking about 25-year-old adults. And this data is not expecting students to go straight from high school into college, okay? This data takes into account the obstacles that life throws at people, and it takes into account the different on and off ramps that a student can use to get to their end goal. And I'm not sure you can actually see it clearly, but I want to point out a few pieces of statistics here. Well, first of all, let me say the whole population of this class of 2012 is a little over 43,000 students. So 43,277 students we're talking about. Of those little over 43,000, only 22% or 9,637 completed a bachelor's degree after 7 years. 44% or 18,873 earned a high school diploma and had some college experience. And while a post-secondary certificate or diploma increased the median salary by a little over $5,000, only 3% of those students actually earned a certificate. So this data shows that when it comes to quality of life, higher education does matter. So there were, and I don't know if I can actually see it, but a little over, 18,873 students had some college experience, but didn't necessarily complete their college experience. So what that means now is not only do they not have that college degree, but they probably also have college debt. So those are things that we need to consider. So our role is critical in helping students find their post-secondary path. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here when I say that you all have tons of things on your plate and you wear many hats. And there is no way that in a day or a year's time you can help meet the needs of every student on all the levels that you're expected to meet them on. You have a lot of mental health counseling, a lot of different things going on. So a lot of times, and we know this, the advising aspect or the post-secondary advising aspect kind of has to take a back seat because there's more immediate and pressing needs. So what we want to help you understand is that there are other people that can help you do some of these things. So if you'll go to the next slide, I want to just talk about some reflection questions. As you think about that student and as you think about that data, how can we equip students to navigate their career options and prepare them? And I know you all do a lot of great things, but I want to talk about how we can utilize others in that role. And if we are not helping students, and when I say we, I'm talking collectively, not just counselors, but educators in general, are not able to ensure that all students are prepared for their post-secondary transition, what are the negative impacts for them personally, but also for our community, because it goes deeper than just that one person. So if you'll go to the next slide, please, Heather. We want to talk about who can help me. And I want you to think about, and I know some of you probably already utilize a lot of partners within your building. Frisky's a big help to a lot of people, English teachers. There's lots of people inside your building, but there are also people out in your community that can help. There's post-secondary institutions, business and industry leaders, community leaders. And when you are able to attend our professional learning series, part of what you will gain is the opportunity to learn from and with others in your role, and learn how they may be able to, or how they may be thinking outside of the box to build a post-secondary advising team. And we're actually going to even have a panel of post-secondary leaders at our spring session where you'll be able to ask questions and that sort of thing. So I'm almost to the end of what I want to share with you, but I do want to share a few resources. So on the next slide, it talks about some of the things that we do beside or in addition to our professional learning series. We have a well-advised podcast that is released monthly, and that is released on the first Thursday of every month. And basically, it's a conversation between myself and an expert or someone that is very knowledgeable in the field of like whatever topic we're talking about that month. We've had military options. This past Thursday, we released a podcast on workforce and work-based learning. So lots of different topics. The future coming up months, we're working on getting all of those lined out, but I know we've got some really good topics planned. The webinar is the second Thursday of every month. It's at 9 Central. And that is a single topic, single advising topic, but it takes usually a deeper dive. It's usually connected to the podcast, but the webinar goes a little bit deeper and gives a chance for counselors and people that are joining to ask questions and learn from people across the state. We also are in the process of starting a monthly promising practice spotlight, in which we will send out information about something wonderful that's going on in the state centered around post-secondary advising. I already mentioned our professional learning, and a little bit I'll show you how you can register for the spring session. And we are also in the process of sending, if you join our mailing list, you will receive a bi-weekly, which every 2 weeks, email that has timely topics of interest. It's just 5 things to know. It's a quick read email, not a lot of information, because I know you have a lot going on. So it's just a really, really quick, brief email. And then we're also sending out a KAA tip of the week. And then on the next slide, I will show you how you can join our mailing, or well, let me ask first of all, I got ahead of myself. Does anybody have any questions? I haven't paid attention to the chat. Are there any questions in the chat, or does anyone have a question that they would want to ask centered around this? We will provide the slides for this presentation. That is available for you all.
Yeah, they will be able to access all the slides once we're finished today.
Okay, if there are no other questions, then I will show you how you can join our email list and stay in touch with KAA. We are on social media, so we're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Advising KY. We are on YouTube, the Kentucky Advising Academy. And if you're not able to join our webinars in person, then you can find our webinars, past webinars on YouTube. Our podcasts are on Spotify and all other major podcast platforms. And you can always email us at kyadvisingacademy@ky.gov. And we have a website, cpe.ky.gov/advisingky. And you can find information about our webinars, podcasts, upcoming professional learning sessions, and more. And I will say that our website is in the process of being revamped, so bear with us if you get on there and the information is not 100% up to date. We're working on that. But we do encourage you to stay in touch with us. Email us if you have questions, if you want some resources. One thing that I forgot to mention that is super exciting is that we are in the process of releasing a Kentucky Advising Academy toolkit, and we hope that we will be able to unveil that at our spring PL session. And that toolkit, we will have a wealth of information, and we hope that it will become your first stop for all things post-secondary advising. It won't be all inclusive, but we hope it will be one of the first places that you will go for information. So I also want to point out that if you do attend our webinars in person, you get an hour of ELA credit. And if you attend our professional learning sessions, you get 6 hours of ELA credit. So that's a huge plus. Now, to sign up for our email list, on the next slide, there's a QR code and a bit.ly that you can either scan or go to the bit.ly, either one. And we encourage you, if you have not, to do that. If you miss this QR code or bit.ly, you can sign up through the CPE website. And I don't know how much time we need to allow for that, but whenever you think that you're ready, Heather, to go to the next slide, there is a registration bit.ly. But I want to say, while you're looking at that QR code there, that our webinar for workforce will be released, or will be occurring this Thursday at 9. And if you have not signed up for our webinar, you still can. You can go to the CPE KY advising page and sign up for that webinar. Leslie Slaughter, a former KDE employee who's now part of CPE, will be leading that webinar discussion, and she's got lots of information centered around workforce. So please join us Thursday if you can. And also, if you can, we would encourage you to register for our spring professional learning event. You can scan the QR code here. Again, it's a 6-hour day. You will get 6 hours of ELA credit. We have lots of great things planned. Like I mentioned, we've got several professional or post-secondary leaders, and they will be able to answer questions, talk about how they elevate those partnerships. We will have a panel Q&A. And so we would definitely encourage you all to attend that. I noticed that someone said, can you please include the bit.ly in the chat, that the QR code wasn't working. I apologize for that, but we can get that for you. I can drop that in the chat after a little bit, after when you go on to the next part, if that's okay, Heather.
Yes, that'd be great, Mitzi. Thank you.
All right. And so we are here for you all. We are working to connect counselors to all the resources. We don't have the answers, but we are here to help you find the answers that you need. We don't have all the answers. Nobody has all the answers, but we are trying very hard to connect you all and to provide resources and opportunities for you to network and share those great things that are happening across the state of Kentucky. There's lots of great things, and just excited to be a part of the Kentucky Advising Academy, excited to work with you all. And if you ever have any questions, please email. My email is mitzi, mitzi.holland@ky.gov, and I can put that in the chat, or you can email our general KAA email address. Heather, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak a little bit this morning about the Kentucky Advising Academy. And I look forward to working with you in the future on some initiatives, and hope to see a lot of you all at our spring PL and on our webinars. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Mitzi. That was a lot of great information. And she's going to drop that bit.ly into the chat and her email. And like we said, you all will get access to all of the slides. So that way you'll have all the information. And let me try with the Google form again. And if this one still does not work, then when we take a break here in just a little while, then I will go back into the original document and I'll get it fixed. So that way you all can for sure sign in. So we will get that taken care of. Okay. Not yet. We are ready for our other two guests today. We have Dr. Florence Chang and Dr. Nicole Fields from KDE. They are part of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Belonging team. I am very honored to get to work with them and just to support their work for statewide educators, including school counselors. So we are very fortunate, and I'm humbled to have them here today because their wealth of knowledge, I know with data-driven practices being so important for us as school counselors, their information and their knowledge is needed for us to continue to move forward and just to model what does it look like as we promote equity and inclusion for our students and look beyond just numerical data. So I'm excited that they're here with us today. So Florence and Nicole, I'll turn it over to you if you're ready.
Yes, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, you sound great.
Good morning, everybody. Happy to be here today. I don't see our screens yet, but I'll do a quick introduction. I'm Dr. Nicole Fields. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator for KDE. I was previously a school counselor. I have been a school counselor at an elementary, middle, and a high school. I ended lastly at a high school, so I enjoy my almost 10 years of counseling. So it's like coming back home when I get a chance to talk to school counselors. Dr. Chang, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, my name is Florence Chang, and I work with Dr. Fields and Heather in the KDE Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Office at KDE. And just so happy to be here today. My previous role was I worked in school improvement planning, so worked a lot with data, and that's a lot of what our topic here is today, and how you use data for improvement. So yeah, this is great. It's just such a pleasure to see how many people are on this call. So thank you for having us.
So do I have access to share screen? Or Heather, are you going to share it? Let's see.
I can share it, or if you would rather share it, that's fine. You let me know which is easier for you. You should be able to share yours if you'd like to.
Stop other screen share. Okay, yes, I see it now. Sorry, it took me a minute to see.
You're fine. Do you want to share your screen?
I'm gonna share mine.
Okay, let me stop. Okay, it's all yours.
Okay, do y'all just see the kids or do you see the PowerPoint?
We see the PowerPoint.
Okay, good. Having multiple screens in the morning time is like, I don't know what you're going to see. So either you're going to see emails, a picture of the family, or the presentation. So we're excited to be here this morning to talk to you about data-driven practices to promote equity and inclusion. So welcome. I think that she's done attendance. Do they have to click again for attendance, or are they good to go from there?
I've reposted the link. So if it's still not working, just put in the chat and let me know. Then I'll get into the document and I'll get it fixed. So.
Okay.
Yep. So you can keep going, Dr. Fields.
Okay. I was like, I don't know if I need to talk about this stuff. No. Go past. Okay. This is my slide.
Yes,
okay. So before we get into the equity-driven data, we always like to start off with definitions, just to make sure that everyone has a clear understanding of what all the terms mean. So DEIB is diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So diversity is really recognizing that everyone has their own individual trait and differences. This could be our culture, your political, your religion. I'm sometimes wear glasses. Sometimes I don't wear my glasses. I have short hair. Dr. Chang has long hair. And Heather has blonde hair. Like, these are our own individual traits. That's how diverse we are. So we always want to make sure that we understand that diversity is just your own individual traits. When we look at equity, we look at the promotion of access, opportunity, and advancement. Equity is not equality. Equality is that I said that everybody is going to get a nice pencil delivered to them to do their work. Equity is that my pencil has to have a pencil grip because I had occupational therapy. So I need a pencil grip to ensure that I can write correctly. Some of us may need the mechanical pencils because they like the feel of the mechanical pencil. It works better. It's a smooth writer. Some of us may need those fat erasers that the kids like that you get from the Dollar Tree because we make a lot of errors. Some of us may need those triangle shaped pencils. And then some of us may need those fat pencils we used to have in kindergarten that they no longer use, but I always love those fat pencils. So that is equity, ensuring that we give you, or that you give that person what they need to be successful in whatever they need to do. Inclusion is the intentional act of creating an environment that fosters mutual respect in relationships. too often when we are going into schools, we hear that I just don't feel like I am included. They aren't including me in these activities. We have to be intentional when we do that. If we're going to say we're going to have a counselor cadre, we need to be intentional that we invite all 3 levels, elementary, middle, and high school, that we reach out and we get the counselors that are so busy they haven't had a chance to read their email. So we want to make sure that they are invited and included in this cadre as well. When we think about belonging, this is the degree to which learners believe and experience they feel that they are accepted, that you really feel like you belong there. And when I talk about belonging, I often think about us as adults and us as counselors. How often have we been in buildings and you just walk in and that's not that warm feeling, and as counselors, we are the heartbeats of the building. We are the warm and fuzzies. We are the school aunties and school uncles that come in there and we give them love when the teachers sometimes, they're having a tough day and the kids are like, I'm just not feeling her. But we want to make sure that we're creating that environment where kids really feel like they belong and they're valued in this building. So that's the terminology. We just want to make sure that everyone has a clear definition. And what I have encouraged is that when I spoke to counselors before, is share these definitions with your school. Everyone should have the opportunity, if not, be able to speak at staff meetings or POCs, just to make sure that you have a common language. And that is one way we can ensure that we're all on the same playing field, that we have a baseline on how to grow in this work. Our mission in KDE, our vision is that each and every student empowered and equipped to pursue a successful future. But I must say, I'm a little, I love ours better. I just think that in our team, we worked really hard to come up with the vision and the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging team. And our vision is that each student and educator in Kentucky feels a sense of belonging. We have all gone through the pandemic and we're still in the midst of the pandemic. Now we have this flu and now we have RSV coming back. They used to be babies. Now we have 12-year-olds with RSV. All this stuff is happening and no one feels like they belong. It's just in and out, a lot of transition. We want even us as educators to feel a sense of belonging when we go into our buildings, when we do our jobs. Because we know our jobs are heavy. We have a lot on our plate, but it just comes easier when you feel like you belong in the spaces that we work in. Our mission is to create and deepen partnerships to remove long-standing barriers to equity by providing supports in developing an equity lens, elevating student and educator voice, and promoting inclusive, equitable, and healing learning communities. Overall, the theory in action is if we work on each of these elements in our mission, then we will accomplish our vision that each student and educator will feel a sense of belonging. I will tell you that this is not an easy task. Sometimes there are challenges, but when we work together collectively, we can get to our theory of action, where we are pushing our mission to get ultimately to our vision that everyone has a sense of belonging. So some of the research, I think this is still me, it's about sense of belonging. Belonging, the degree which, like I said before, which learners believe and experience and feel that they are accepted by adults and peers, as well as respected as a valued contributor in their learning and social environment. Think about the students that come into our schools that they're there, they come in, but they don't really feel like they belong. It's like they're almost robotic. But the students that really feel like they belong, you'll see that they have a higher school satisfaction. They want to come to school. They want to see their teachers. They want to do good. Their grades are so much better because they feel like they belong in this community. You most definitely will see fewer behavior issues. And this comes again to when we talk about our social emotional learning, all of those, all of those tenets when it comes to that help build a sense of belonging. And we also see a fewer mental health challenges that our students face when they feel like they belong in the school. Even as adults, think about when we have had a job, whether it's, your first job, second job, whatever, that one job you just didn't like because you just didn't feel like you belonged. You went in, you did your job, but no one knew your name. No one spoke to you. No one say, hey, I'm so glad that you're here today. But then think about the job that you love. And us as adults, where it may be the school that you're at, where they actually acknowledge you on Counselor's Week. They actually say, good morning, Dr. Fields. It's so good to see you. They notice different things about you. I noticed that you cut your hair. I like that. You feel like you are connected in that school. And then think about the students. Do we call our students by their names? Do we know anything about their families? Do we uplift them when they're having a good and positive day? Do we make positive phone calls instead of your child has not been here at school in 5 days? But if we took time to really build that sense of belonging for our students, it definitely would show all those satisfactions of schools with academic, social, and emotional needs. So we have to think about that when we look at sense of belonging, and the research shows that. Also, when it comes to research, we have to think about the long-term impact. I remember as an elementary counselor, I couldn't get past elementary. Like, I just want to focus on K through 5. But to be really successful in our job, we have to always think of long-term. Even in middle, how they're going to get to high school and beyond. And high school is once they graduate and beyond. Really looking at the big picture. So if we're looking at sense of belonging, how can we create that foundation so the students and families have that connectiveness in our schools as they go on in the education career? Because what we have seen that our youth that are at risk, and they have 3 stats, that 90% of our students have been bullied, 17% of our students have considered suicide, and 14% have misused prescription pain medicine. This was actually documented in 2019. Think about now in 2022. I would imagine that these stats are actually higher because they were in isolation for 18 months. We have a political climate. All of the things that are happening in this world right now are impacting our youth. But when we show that when we work with our families, when we work with our students and our school, and we build that connectiveness, students are less likely, again, to have the mental health issues, to really experience violence, engage in risky sexual behavior, and use any type of substance. And as community engagement, we have to think, even as counselors, really, how do we do that? It is providing that opportunity for parents to come in and having those open doors. We said we have an open door policy. Really, truly have an open door policy. It is coming out of our offices and being on carts and rolling down the carts and letting the kids see you at transition. It is going to classrooms and saying good morning and having chants. But by doing this, schools can implement positive youth development programs. I used to think of, and I was really a person on themes like Motivational Monday, Wellness Wednesday. When I got to high school counseling, it was Food Truck Friday because teachers were struggling, kids were struggling. I was struggling with all of this. So I thought, why not bring a food truck? So we brought a food truck in on payday Fridays. And I have never seen adults shush children because we didn't announce it until that morning. They're like, shh, be quiet. I got to hear about the food truck. And so when I would get on the announcements on Friday, we'll do a drum roll. And the food truck was cheesy. It was a cheesy sandwich food truck. It did grilled cheese sandwiches. Oh my gosh, you could just hear the teacher's excitement about the food truck. Now, the kids, we can give them a food truck. But sometimes we try to give them a gift certificate so they can go to a food truck on the weekend. But we try to do things where even with Wellness Wednesdays, giving kids stress balls, doing yoga in the classroom, whatever we could do to help improve our environment. Parents having those frequent conversations. I would call parents and I would say, okay, I'm Dr. Fields, but do you want Dr. Fields the counselor or do you want Dr. Fields the school auntie? And they would laugh because I'm like, okay, Dr. Fields is going to be very, to the point. But the school auntie, I'm going to be a little more nicer and say, our nephew, my nephew, your son. And that's the terminology I would use if I was the auntie. But if I was the counselor and they wanted Dr. Fields, I would say so-and-so's name and be very to the point. You'll be surprised when parents will actually say, I want the school auntie because it's warmer. And I took ownership that student, he or she were my niece and those are my nephews. And then together, collectively, we're going to work together, make sure that they get the needs that they need to be successful. And providers can discuss relationships and school experiences. My mental health practitioner, and I also was a previous Frisky, were like the left and my right. And we met every week to have discussions about our students. We brought in outside services with 7 counties, Centerstone, because we had especially when we came back full-time and from the pandemic, we were just experiencing a lot of stress from my teachers to my students, the cafeteria workers. Everybody was feeling this stress. So we had to be really creative about how to bring in providers and have conversations with them on how to help support our students and our staff at any time we had any type of difficulties. I will say, even now, it was very important. We experienced a lot of student death at the school that I was at. It was a lot of violence. You may not have gun violence, but we have students that have had cancer. It impacts the whole school. Dr. Chang and our kids go to, we have the same middle school and high school. And so we had one family had a devastating event that impacted our school community. And so both of my sons and her daughters were impacted by what happened, but be able to talk to the providers at the school, they were able to get the supports that they needed to be successful as they experienced that trauma.
Dr. Fields.
Yes.
One thing I will just add that I read just yesterday that kind of blew my mind, because what you just showed in the previous slide was data about the importance of connectedness and how that lives with you for years and years. That data is actually from 2019, so pre-pandemic. And so now there's starting to be more and more data coming out of what is happening post-pandemic. And one of the interesting stats that I wrote down, I wanted to share with you all, was the US Census Bureau. They do a survey regularly on, it's called the American Time Use Survey. It is something that they collect from people of different ages, including our teens. And what they found right now, this is 2021 data, a 64% decline in how many hours kids are spending with their friends each week, and a 50% increase in how often they are alone each week. And so those are just, that's the current state. Like, remember, as we were in the pandemic, what daily habits we got used to. And for kids, it's looking like they got used to being alone and on their phones and on their devices. And that habit has not broken. So right now we see, just an incredible, we have never seen increases like this before in generational data. But what does that mean? And be thinking about, what does that mean when you have a 50% increase in the number of hours you are alone? So just be, as we're connecting, the idea of sense of belonging to outcomes, what are we going to have to be repairing and working on in our school community to help address the habits that they formed during the pandemic? So sorry to interrupt, but I read that yesterday, and I was like, I have to tell this group today because it's such important data for you all to know.
That is good. We were talking on Sunday, my beautician and I, about habits that we did through the pandemic that we are not doing so well with. And one of the things that we did, because we were stuck in the house, we were having family dinner together at least once a week. But during the pandemic, we had family dinner together every night because we would play a game after we ate. We were just trying to, make use of this time together. And now that we have gone back to this quote unquote new normal, we've gotten busy with ballet and band and science Olympia, that we have gotten away from really sitting down because we're on all these different schedules. So being more intentional about, again, as one of our DEIB, so the kids have a sense of belonging when they come back home. But even as counselors, thinking about the habits that we did to really get kids to feel that connectiveness. And not only as a counselor where I was in the hallway, I made sure that I went to lunch with the students. I didn't necessarily eat lunch with the students, but I was down there with them just so they could see my face. And I might have like some cheeses, something simple, but not actually a full-fledged lunch, but just taking the time out to go sit with them, even in the morning car ride lines or think about how we can get in those spaces to build that connectiveness, so they feel that sense of belonging, because they will think about that even as they go along in their education career, about that one time, or I saw my counselor every day, and then they would go to the next school and look for that counselor and continue on building that relationship. But basically, we want to wrap up this part by saying foster a sense of belonging honors and values and recognizes diversity. We are all coming from different backgrounds, but when you have that sense of belonging, we recognize that diversity, we embrace that, and we honor that about you. We promote it through an equity lens. Like I said before, as counselors, we cannot give the uniqueness of what we do the same way to every student, to every family. We have to adapt. There are families in which that I talk to them that I am very firm, but I'm loving, but I'm very firm. And there are other families that I talk to that I can cut up with because, you know, I see her at church on Sunday. And then there's other families that I have to go to the house because they may not have a phone. So I need to go to the house and I'll bring someone with me and we can sit and have those conversations. But that is equity. They all got the same message, but they all got it differently because they all needed me differently. So we have to keep that in mind. And by creating inclusion, healing spaces, each student and educator is heard and seen. I just went to a conference, and the one thing that I walk away from, it was that I actually felt heard and seen. I saw people that look like me and that I can go in and say, I felt like this. And they said, I understand how you feel. When we create those environments in our schools, we can even do this through our student affinity groups, whether that be a bunch of them, whatever that may be. We may have affinity groups in my son's middle school. They have a NARTO, whatever the NARTO is. I don't know what it is, but I know he likes it. And they have a NARTO group because they are all into that world. So you parents out there, or you elementary folks, middle school folks, whatever it is, I know it's some kind of cartoon something, but that's how he loves going to that after school program, and that's where he feels seen and heard, and he could talk about Norto. He talks to me and I'm just like, that's great. I don't know what it is, but he has a space for that. And it's important that we think about that as counselors. How are we creating those spaces, even the healing spaces, as our students and our educators are experiencing a lot of trauma? How are we embracing them when they come back? Do we have calming spaces for them? And if you don't have a calming spacing, how can your office be a calming space? How can you create that? Is it dimming the lights and having music and having aromas in the air that is calming, and stress balls? Think about how we could do that for our students and our educators, because we want everyone to feel seen and heard, that we're providing through an equity lens, that everybody gets what their needs, and we are recognizing the diversity. So we have a reflective question we want you to think about, is reflect on experience of an inequality or exclusion that you've had. What can schools do to help create a sense of belonging? You can unmute, I can drop it in the chat. So let's kind of chat about that a little bit. What kind of experience have you had when it comes to that? And what can we do in schools as counselors to help create a sense of belonging? Let me put my chat up so I can see. And if you want to unmute, feel free to unmute. I like to talk. Let's see.
We did a project here at our school. We were wanting to improve the school environment, put some uplifting things up. So we actually did some designs, whether it be history, whether it be science. Outside my counselor's office, I've got a Dear Students, and it's got, you know, you're cared for, you're important, you're smart, and so forth. But I actually gave the designs to the kids and let them work in groups, and they went through and they painted all the murals on the wall. I had a couple of them said, hey, can I sign this where I painted it? And I said, sure. You know, and they said, well, when my kids go to school, you know, in years to come, they'll see that their mom or their dad, you know, actually was a part of the school, and we actually did this. So by letting the kids actually do the murals, it really improve the whole environment of the school.
I love that. It kind of reminds me we did in the high school I was at. It looked like everything was beige. It just looked like, just to be a lack of transparency, like a prison. Everything was just beige. And so one of the things the new principal challenged the students to come up with a academy color and find the emblem they wanted to recognize, like Freshman Academy, Create Academy, you know. And so each students, they voted on it, and you know, and so when I went in there a couple weeks ago, they have now painted the academy. So freshmen agreed they wanted purple because it was royal. So they have purple walls, and it was really cool to see the students help decide what color and what emblem they wanted and create a mission for that academy. So again, they were able to create that sense of belonging. I love that the students were able to paint it themselves. I don't know if I would have trusted my high schoolers to do that. But I love that idea. Thank you for sharing.
It actually turned out really well. It was my high schoolers that did it. I've got actually 7 through 12. So
that's
they
good.
had like little competitions, but what we did, I had several of the old fashioned overhead projectors. So I put it on transparency and let them put it up on overhead. And they've actually come up with ideas. They're wanting to do the stairwells as well and paint the stairs. And it's funny that you mentioned that as far as prison. That's what the kids said. They said it feels like a prison because everything is so plain and sterile, but like ours was gray. We've got gray everywhere. And, you know, they said, we need to liven it up. We need to brighten it up. And they really, really enjoyed it. But now, like on the stairwell going up to the English department, they're wanting to make it look like books sitting on a shelf and paint each step looking like a different book and put the title and the author and everything.
Oh, I love that.
Really cute little ideas, but it's a work in progress. But I told them, I said, you know, we'll continue a little bit each year. And that way each group of students kind of feels like they're a part of the school.
I love that. I think over the pandemic, we saw a lot of educators like, remember decorating the bathrooms. They were painting and putting positive messages in the bathrooms. So the students would come back and instead of the plain old, I call them plain airport bathrooms, that they actually had like pink and purple and gold and yellow and blue and just different messagings within there. And I thought that was pretty cool that and the students got to go in and paint stuff too, that, you know, it's a place that we always go, but why not make it beautiful? So I'm gonna check the comments real quick. Anybody else want to unmute when I'm looking at comments? Clubs that provide service learning. I love that. Common SEL messages, vocabulary built around SEL curriculum framework following Castle's model. And we know Castle is all things SEL. That's like the perfect place to get everything. In elementary school, provide jobs for students. I love that as a elementary counselor. I had a mini counselor that I really wanted a mini counselor. And when I would get a mini counselor, you know, I gave them a lanyard, they had a key and a clipboard, and they would walk around with me and you couldn't tell them anything. But it was just so good. And they built that confidence that I was a counselor too. And I got to really explain what counselors do on a different level outside of, you know, we go in classroom and provide those lessons, but a really 101, and they got to, you know, be a mini counselor. So I love that. I kind of miss my elementary days. Big 3 Bearcat motto, logos and colors. Yes, KEDC Lexington elementary school students can apply for jobs throughout the school. I love it. So yes, those are unique ways that we can create a sense of belonging. But I challenge everyone on this Zoom to actually think about something that you haven't done, and perhaps, you know, doing a quick needs assessment with the students, a quick, you know, everybody has phones, do a QR code, let them scan it. You know, what could we do to provide a better space of belonging? And just wonder what the students will say and how we can get that quick data and figure out what we can do differently. And you have student voice and choice with that as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Chang, who's going to talk to you about the data sources. She is AKA better known as Quant Flow, and I'm Qual Nick. And we're going to call Heather the mixed method. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Chang.
Thank you. And I will share my screen. So let me get to the slide we're on. Okay, so can you all see, Heather? Can you see the screen? Great. Okay, so what we're going to talk about in this next section is what are a few KDE sources of data that you can be using, and then we're going to connect that with a couple of the ASCA resources around goal setting. This is the time of year some of you may be serving on your school improvement plan committees, doing kind of a mid-year check on your data so you can kind of adjust for when you come back after break. So we just wanted to show you a few data sources that you should have access to right now. So one is we're going to talk about the equity dashboard. And then we're going to also talk about voice data. So anytime that you are looking at data, so I know you all are looking at school report card and survey data, I always like to go ahead and outline what are the questions you're trying to answer. So this is an example of that. So when we go into the equity dashboard, we're going to be looking at things like, do our student groups have equitable access to advanced courses? Do our student groups have positive outcomes? If not, which groups are showing disparities and in what areas? So let's take a look at some screenshots, and then I'll also let you know how to access. So this is something that KDE created about a year ago, and it's a suite of visualizations using a program called Tableau, and it supports school and districts as they're looking at their data. It's a quick click to be able to look at this data in this dashboard, and it gives you groups of students who might be at risk of being over or underrepresented in different areas like chronic absenteeism, advanced coursework, and it's color coded. So most of what I'll show you today is just to show like how the color coding system can really help you kind of start looking at disparities. When there's so much data to look at, Kentucky is known for having tons of data in our information system. It can be hard to kind of, okay, what do we spotlight? What do we focus on? Because everything seems important when you're looking at the data. So this is a way to identify both a big picture and then also narrow down how to look at groups that might be needing some more attention and supports. So how do you get to it? You log into Infinite Campus, and on the left side of the navigation menu, there is something called Tableau Visualizations. It would be right under your name on the left side. And then there's the pathway to get there. So once you get to Tableau, you can go to Explore and Student Equity Dashboard. If you do not see it, you contact your district Infinite Campus administrator. And it is a local decision as to whom should have access to KDE's data visualization tool, but it is recommended that all counselors have access to their school or to their district if they're central office. So that's how you get to the equity dashboard. It's framed in something called risk ratios. So risk ratios examine the equity of outcomes between student groups. And so when a group experiences inequities, the equity dashboard identifies them as at risk. So what is a risk ratio? It compares the likelihood of an event occurring for one group to the likelihood of the same event occurring for another group. And what it does, it basically level sets your sample size, your group size. So if you have a lot of kids who are one race and a lot of kids in a smaller group of kids in a different race, it'll level set. And if you're familiar with things like per capita metrics that you sometimes hear, like what's the per capita rate of crime, for example, in different cities, you can compare those because you have controlled for the sample size. That's what the risk ratio does. So if there is disproportionality, that that group will be identified as at risk. And you can be at risk in two different ways. You can be overrepresented in things that are undesirable. So you might be getting some kids that are more likely to be absent, for example. That's undesirable. So they would be considered at risk and overrepresented. You also could have groups that are underrepresented, so less likely to experience a desirable event. That would be something like access to advanced coursework, access to gifted and talented. You might have groups that are less likely to be in that, to have that access. So there's two ways then that you can be at risk. In terms of what indicators are on this dashboard, we have special education, chronically absent, out of school and in school suspension, and it is up to date. So it is based on what is in Infinite Campus yesterday. So it kind of refreshes every night. And then areas where on the dashboard where students can be underrepresented are with gifted and talented, advanced coursework and dual credit, CTE coursework, CTE completers, and the benchmark state assessment. So that would be like KSA, your Kentucky State Assessments. And what groups are compared? So you see all the race ethnicity groups that we have in the system, as well as other student groups, which includes things like gender, economically disadvantaged, English learner, foster, homeless, migrant, military connected, and students with disabilities. Okay, so here's how it actually works. The risk ratios are color coded. So when we pull up the data, it's going to show blue if there is not disproportionality between groups. It will show orange. It might look red on your screen. On my screen, it looks orange if there is disproportionality. And so in this example, you can already see, even if you can't see the numbers, you can just see that for out of school suspensions, we have Black students, Pacific Islanders, and students with 2 or more races that are considered disproportional. And when you hover over the dot, it gives you what numbers actually fed that calculation. So you can see there are 2,365 Black students out of a total of 72,000 receiving out of school suspensions, compared to 5,300 that non-Black students that got out of school suspensions out of the total population of 607,000. So that's state level data from last year. And what that tells us is Black students are 3.68 times more likely to receive out of school suspensions. And that is considered disproportional. So that is why it's in orange. So here's an example of, I'm going to minimize screen. So Heather or Dr. Fields, if anybody has questions, please just stop me because I can't see the chat. This is the screenshot of what it looks like when you pull up your equity dashboard. So again, this is for the state. When you get to your school or district, you'll see on the right side, there's a lot of different filters here. You won't be able to filter by district, but you will be able to see your school name. And there's multiple ways you can filter the data. You can look at it by grade, you can look at it by special education status, and so on. And this is a screenshot of what it looks like by race. So quick visual here. This is what makes it so powerful, is you don't have to do the calculations by hand. You can just look at it and go, okay, we have 2 groups that are disproportional in out of school and in school suspension. So in this case, it's Black and 2 or more. And you go to the next group of variables, you'll see more orange dots, right? So right now you can see, okay, we've got some disproportionality in gifted and talented. We've got some disproportionality in advanced access to advanced coursework and CTE completers. So, and again, you'll see this is state level data from last year. So one of the things that stuck out to us when we were doing kind of the like, so what, now what, and now view of the data is the one group that sticks out is our Black students. They were disproportional in discipline. And then you come here and you see there's also disproportionality in access and opportunities. And then you go to the next slide and you'll see this is our state assessments and for reading, English, science, and math. And you'll see, again, even the more orange dots. So now you're seeing students that are underrepresented in if they're less likely to be proficient according to the state assessment. And you see here, again, we saw the same racial group here. So our Black students being underrepresented in proficiency for reading, English, science, and math. And so that's a way to spotlight your data to go, okay, I'm seeing a repeated group that's having trouble from beginning to end in terms of access and opportunity, behavior, and then the endpoint being kind of your summative data on this side. So it gives some insights into connecting what different, like the ABC model, academics, behavior, course performance, you can kind of start seeing what are some of the risk factors that are connected. And you all know there's a strong connection between the behavior data and academics.
Hey,
So
Florence.
that is so with the equity dashboard, though, one thing I will say is it is just the what. It is just here's where we see disparities. It does not tell you the why.
Dr. Chang,
Yes.
someone asked a question, what is the tab in IC called? Is it Tableau?
Tableau. Yes. Tableau visualizations.
And Florence, when they're looking at their screen, when they go
Yep.
into their Infinite Campus, we had a question, where would that tab be if they have access? Because I know if they don't have access, they won't see that on their screen. So would it be on the left, the right, just to make sure that they can look in the right place?
It would be on the left side. So so basically when they go into their to Infinite Campus, on the left side, they should see their name in Infinite Campus on the left side. And then underneath their name, they should see something called Tableau visualizations. If they don't see it, it probably means they don't have access. It's not actually a tab. So I know we're familiar with those little tabs in Infinite Campus. It's actually in the navigation part, kind of more on the left side.
Okay.
Is that helpful? Is there any other questions? And I think I can see the chat. It is there in mine when I click sign in error.
Yeah.
It's on the index side. Okay,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, because some are saying it's on the index side, and a couple have said they get a sign-in error. So I'm wondering if they don't have access.
Right, that could mean that they don't have access if there's a sign-in error. So it might not be turned on. So you want to kind of talk to your Infinite Campus administrator. It shouldn't take long to turn on. So you can turn it on they can turn it on just by clicking into their rights dashboard, but it is your district administrator. And the reason why there is stronger permissions on this is because the dashboard has very sensitive data. It does not suppress. So if you have one student in a group, it's going to show up on that dashboard, which is why I've been more careful on this.
Yeah. And for those of you who find out you may not have access, if you need any help to advocate or support, I know between us three, we will be happy to help email somebody just to make sure you do have access, because like Florence said at the beginning, it is recommended school counselors should have access to Tableau so they can, like we're doing today, so we can start talking about the data and look at how that's going to help drive your program and the services you offer. So we can help in any way that you need to with support for that.
Yes, absolutely. And it is hard data to actually compute by hand. Like a lot of times you might be disaggregating your proficiency data or your behavior data by hand, but to do like gifted and talented and advanced coursework and some of the other pieces on the dashboard, it is very hard to do that. So we definitely encourage you, if you don't have access, to go ahead and ask for those permissions. And we at KDE can absolutely help if you hit a wall or if there's some sort of other error that is happening. So yes, Equity Dashboard is a great place to start when you're looking at inequities across different groups. But like I said, it is not the end point. So anytime you're looking at data, you always want to, data is just a conversation starter. So the Equity Dashboard just gives you that first look at the data, but you have to dig a little bit deeper to actually understand, well, why are we seeing the data that we're seeing? And so one thing we wanted to give you kind of a connector with the why is looking at perception data and voice data. So we're going to take a look at some educator data and some student voice data that could help illuminate your Equity Dashboard data. So with student voice data, there is a survey you all are probably very familiar called the Quality School Climate and Safety Survey. It's administered to kids 3rd grade and up, and it rates items such as, I feel like I'm part of my school. So again, some school belonging items. My school is a place where students feel encouraged. Students from this school respect each other's differences, regardless of gender, culture, race, religion, ability. And then they also look at whether students believe adults are respectful. So this is a great kind of data set to explore further. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes when we get to goal setting. Here is an example of something that from that data set that we've disaggregated at KDE. So if you remember, a couple slides ago, I showed you that our Black students are 3 times more likely to believe that, or to be out of school, receive an out of school suspension. That's real data. They're 3 times more likely, definitely a huge concern that we see across the state. Well, one of the things that we looked at then was we looked at the student perception data across the state. And so the way to read this is students were asked the question, the school rules are fair, and they had to agree or strongly agree, disagree, and strongly disagree with that statement. And this is breaking down the data by elementary, middle, high for the last 2 years. So this is kind of post-pandemic, last 2 years. And you'll see, like, here's an example for elementary school students. Most kids, 88%, thought the school rules are fair. That did drop from last year to this past spring, so 88 to 84. So little drops all the way across. White students, 88 to 86. You look at Black students, 82 to 75. So they were already starting a little bit lower with the school rules are fair, and then they dropped quite a bit more than their counterparts. If you look at middle, this is interesting data here. So you'll notice there's a difference between levels. No surprise, those kids go from elementary to middle. They're less likely to believe the rules are fair. So you'll see there was a drop from 69%, 88% at elementary. Now it's down to 69% think that the rules are fair. And then there was also a drop from last year. So from 69 to 60%, so almost a 10% drop there from post-pandemic. That first year we came back, and then last year. But what's really interesting is, again, when we were looking at our Black students, we were thinking, okay, so they are more likely to receive these in-school and out-of-school suspensions, but look at the perception at middle school for this past year. So by the time, so last year they were at 62%, but by the time they experienced like that full year of in-person school, this dropped to 49%. So less than half of our Black students at middle school believe that the school rules are fair. And it's not that different for high school. So that's at 51% agreed that the school rules are fair. Again, this just gives us a little bit more insight. So we see the disproportionality in suspensions for this one group of students, but we also see that they are experiencing something at the schools that has influenced their perception about discipline and the culture and climate. And so again, one more insight to kind of bridge your equity dashboard data to the perception data. And I'll skip this slide. This is very similar data across another question. I just wanted you all to see there is multiple questions on the Quality School Climate and Safety Survey that are really helpful. This is one around all students are treated the same if they break the rules. And so again, when we look at middle Black students, it went from 71% down to 58%. So again, they're feeling and perceiving differential treatment based on the consequences that they see being administered. So that's your student data. Now, educator data, remember when Dr. Fields talked about our mission and vision, that each student and educator feels a sense of belonging. We were very intentional to make sure we included educators. And so as we're kind of reflecting on that data set that we just saw, it's important to also look at what are our educators experiencing and feeling. And so there was the impact survey is one KDE resource that you all are very familiar with. It was administered in the winter of 2021. It's administered every 2 years. So it'll be coming out again, not this school year, but the next school year. And again, when you all get the link to the PowerPoint, you can see all these links. They will take you straight to the data. But this particular survey asked so many questions about that are useful for understanding kind of where are some places we might start when we think about our strategies. But I'm going to just talk about a couple of them, which is educating all students and emotional well-being. So how are our educators doing? Well, 75% of them are saying they are concerned about the emotional well-being of their colleagues. 40% did not feel effective at their job. 64% said they are concerned about their own emotional well-being. And 1 out of 4 do not feel a sense of belonging. So that is very sobering data about our educators. And our sense of belonging for educators is actually lower than our sense of belonging for kids. So if you go back to the kid data and you see, okay, what is the sense of belonging for kids? It's slightly lower than our educators. So we see from the impact survey that, yes, our kids were, from the other data, we know our kids are struggling, but we also see our educators are voicing many concerns about their working conditions. They also rated items about, and we go back to what Dr. Fields said about celebrating and acknowledging diversity and promoting inclusion. They were also asked items about how comfortable are you incorporating new material about people from different backgrounds into the curriculum. Fairly positive, 81% felt comfortable incorporating new material. How comfortable are you interacting with students from different backgrounds? Again, fairly favorable, about 86%. So we see some positive spots here in the data, but we also saw that when it comes to comfortable, like how comfortable are you having conversations around diversity, that drops to about a third, being favorable and comfortable. And then what about when you ask educators about their knowledge of strategies around sensitive diversity issues, about half felt comfortable. So you're seeing kind of some variation here in terms of, I'm comfortable with the interactions when we talk about like the strategies, the instructional strategies, or the conversations. Maybe a little light here that we need, a little spotlight that we might need to help our educators. And again, this is state level data. So this is how we're kind of putting the pieces together of where to focus our work. So I'm going to stop for a second and again, just open up the chat box or unmute yourself as you're looking at the data for educators. Why is that important for for the data that we're seeing for students? So when we see that our educators are struggling with sense of belonging, what are the implications for the data and our strategies for students? Yes, I already see in the chat, teachers' attitude are reflective in our students. Absolutely. There's definitely a trickle effect, right? When I come home and if my spouse is in a bad mood, or I'm in a bad mood, my kids can feel it. Kids can tell who's genuine. Yes. I always say there's research showing, hallway conversations are really important. If you have homeroom and your teacher only talk to you in homeroom, but then they don't acknowledge you outside of that homeroom, it can really hurt your relationship because the kids can feel like, well, they're just being nice to me in homeroom, but they don't really care. So yes, absolutely. Informal conversations are that authentic after class, before class, super important time.
It was funny that this conversation, my sons and I were just talking, I guess 2 nights ago. My kids are 30 years old, and they got talking about teachers and who they remembered and who had an impact, not about content. And I had a high achiever and one that we celebrated every D. I mean, every D we celebrated. He's doing great. He's doing fantastic. He's making more money than all of us, but all they talked about were those relationships. The teacher who said good morning to them every day, particularly the ones in high school, middle school and high school. Elementary was fantastic, nurturing all this. And somehow, when I work with councils and different people, high school kids almost need to be nurtured more than elementary school kids do. And I think we've got an atmosphere that they're not. And their needs. But I love this listening to you talk, because this is exactly what they were talking about, and my one son, who was the D student, it affected his whole day. It affected his whole day, who the very first person talked to him and what they said and what they did. And it ruined his day. My son never skipped school. He skipped in school. So they would call me and say, Sam's somewhere in the school. I said, well, did you check Mr. Turner's room? Or he would go to English, but he would go to the English teacher, not the one he was assigned to, but the one he preferred. But it was all about relationships and everything you're talking about and reading. So 30 years, they're 30 years old and they can still, you can see it on their faces, the ones that just changed their lives by having a relationship with them.
Yeah, I love that comment because, like I had said at the beginning, I worked a lot with school improvement processes and helping CSI schools and things like that. And one of the things that sometimes people jump to when they're like, oh, we got to, what's going on with our reading curriculum, because we're seeing literacy issues and our reading scores are not where we want to be. And all of a sudden you're kind of reshifting your groupings, you're looking at your map data like 100 times more in depth. And sometimes we just have to step back and go, well, let's look at, the teachers teaching literacy. Or how are they doing? Are they okay? Because sometimes it's not necessarily an intervention for the kids, but maybe some supports that are needed for the adults. And so the data that we're seeing right now is showing that, a lot of our teacher vacancies are not being filled right now. And so that tells us that other teachers are taking on more. They're covering classes. Their administrators are also covering classes, which means they may not be as available when there's a crisis. So it's telling us that we need to think about our adults. So when we get back into like thinking about strategies, you know, we'll encourage you to think 360, think about the kids in addition to their families, in addition to the staff, and also think about yourselves. We talk to a lot of our counselors when we go out to the state, and most of the time their buckets are way empty because they have been taking care of everyone else. And so so just be reflecting on that piece. I think this is probably a good time, Heather, for us to take like a, what do you think, 10-minute break ish?
Yeah, let's do 10 minutes, and then
Okay.
we'll come back and get into the data and the actual documents and practice with that. Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
So we probably won't go till 12 is my guess, but I think the second half of this, we're going to practice like using the data we just saw to like write some goals and then connect to the standards that ASCA has provided in some of their resources and do some goal setting. But again, thinking about that mix of data. Any questions at all before we take a break?
I just want to say that definitely hit home for me, because, you know, we did the STS program with UK last year, and it has worked out great, helping the teachers and the bus drivers, everybody. But I'm kind of the one that's left behind, you know, because we can't find teachers. So literally I'm teaching 3 classes a day, and I'm the only guidance counselor in the building, 7 through 12. So, you know, trying to bounce around and get everything done, you know, but it is the caring environment. My grandfather passed away a few years back, and actually my mother as well. And they were educators. And that's one thing that I remember with them at their funeral. You know, my mother hadn't taught, she passed away in 2017, and no, 2019. And she had retired in 96. And there were people coming to her funeral, and those were things that they were saying. You know, they said, I remember being in your mom's class in 4th grade, and she handmade everybody a Christmas stocking for Christmas and had little gifts in it. So just little things that the kids remembered. And these were people that were older than I am, you know, and they remembered those little things.
Yeah, that emotional connection is what we remember, both negative and positive. Actually, you always remember who told you did something wrong, and then you also remember the people who made you feel valued. So thank you for sharing that. And so, yes, I absolutely think this is the current state we're in, is working on this piece because of the data that you saw earlier from Dr. Fields, that there's connections that have been harmed by COVID, and we need to start intensifying. When we say accelerate learning, it's also accelerating belonging. So I appreciate that. And so we'll take 10 minutes, come back at like 10:40. How about that?
Yes.
Okay, that's good. Thank you all. So we are going to dig into the ASCA documents now. So just to wrap up in the last section, this kind of summarized what we talked about with 3 sources of data that are available from KDE. So when you get the slide deck, this is kind of a quick reference slide so you can remember where they're located. But we are going to get now into goal setting. So understanding how do you use that data and marry that with the tools that ASCA's provided to set goals. And so we're going to start with the annual student outcome goal. And I know, I think Heather put the PowerPoint into the chat that you can get to. But if you click on the form here, number 1, annual student outcome goal, let's take a look at their form. So the form is really nicely put together because it's very simple, and it starts with identifying the data. So we're going to talk about that. Creating the goal statement. Supplemental data. That's the important piece we just talked about, which is making sure when you are looking at data, you are getting perspectives from different role groups and stakeholders. Then it moves into looking at procedures and policies that could be associated with your goal. And then finally, looking at the student standards that ASCA has set in order to develop like target and narrow down kind of the mindset behavior standards that are associated with your goal. And then how are you going to assess this? So it's really just 2 pages. So it's not a complicated form. I really like it. I think it's a lot simpler than a lot of improvement templates that I've seen. And so you can access that and kind of jot notes on it. We do also have taken some screenshots in the slides. So the first part is around identifying your data and creating a goal statement. And your goal statement should be written as like a SMART goal. And so most people have probably seen what that is, but I just put a reference slide just to refresh you if you don't remember. So SMART is having that specific goal, having it measurable, attainable, relevant, and then time-bound, time-based. And so I'll give you an example now just so you can see what does a SMART goal sound like and look like. So using the ASCA form, this is just an example of using the data that we just saw. So when I go to the top, identify and describe outcome data. In this case, I'm just practicing and I'm going to say, my middle school is going to utilize data from the equity dashboard to address disproportionality in discipline. And currently the dashboard indicates that our Black students are 3 times more likely to receive an out-of-school suspension than other students. So that's just an example. If you all are working with your school improvement teams, you probably have already done a needs assessment and identified kind of priorities. So you would be using those priorities to kind of narrow down and set this goal. But in this case, that's the example that we'll use is around the equity dashboard and the discipline data that we saw, and then creating a goal statement. So for the goal statement here in purple, by the end of May of 2024, our Black students will decrease the disproportionality in discipline by 2 times from the 3.0 baseline to the 1.0 target. That's the risk ratio number as measured by the equity dashboard. And of course, you can write this in any way that is appropriate for your goal. So you could use percents, you can use actual numbers, but this is an example of a SMART goal in the sense that it's specific to a metric, right? So it's disproportional and discipline. It's measurables because I've identified how it's going to be measured. That's always really important. So when you are setting a goal, go ahead and put that statement as measured by, so that way people know exactly how you are going to gather that data. Attainable. So this is a hard one. I would say this actual goal is more of a stretch goal because it is trying to do something pretty drastic, going from not being disproportional to so going from that orange dot to that blue dot. It may take more than 1 year to do that, but for this particular example, I'm going to be ambitious and say it's going to take us 1.5 years to get there. So yeah, attainable, and then relevant. So is this relevant to our school? So given what I know about this school, I'm going to say yes, because we have a lot of students in our school that are affected by this metric. And then time bound. So when are you looking at this data? What is your goal? So that's the May 2024. And a lot of times when we're looking at SMART goals, sometimes you forget a piece. So it's just a good reminder to set your goals with that outline. Okay, so for annual student outcome goals, the other piece is what I was saying about making sure you're looking at other data. So I wouldn't mind if we had a chance right now just to brainstorm in the chat when you are looking. Let's use the example of discipline data. So I went ahead and put an example in here of this. For students, you might be looking at the school quality and climate safety survey. That might be one piece that you're gathering from students. What are some things that school counselors might be looking at if you're looking at discipline? So what kind of information is you all as school counselors would you be reflecting upon? And you can put that in the chat or just come off mute if you prefer. So yes, I'm just going to put some in. So this is some examples of what I'm seeing. Right, lots of PBIS data. So absolutely your PBIS information, Frisky surveys, panorama. Awesome. Okay, how about teachers? What kind of information would you be looking at when you're looking at your teachers?
Probably, do they have a high number of referrals to the office for behavior?
Right, referrals to office, maybe by staff or by team or something like that. That's great. And yes, I love Heather, like, yes, definitely the outcomes, meeting minutes about the outcomes of what students are saying. Yep. SRSS screener, yes, so that might go under like student reports or teacher report. So some of these can kind of overlap. Right, by team, by period, by location. Is it like the cafeteria or the buses? How about administrators? Like, what would you want to gather from your administrators? Like for me, I might be thinking about like trainings, PDs being offered by the administrations. System for referrals. Yes, communication, right? Communication of protocols. What's the expectations, right? When there's a student struggling in the classroom, what's the administrator, what's the behavior support system look like? And then how about parents? What would we want to know from our parents? You might want surveys on their connectedness to school. So this would be something that we know is important for outcomes, is that parent-school partnership. We might talk about this some more, but empathy interviews with families. So if you have a group of students that are really struggling with behavior, one place to also start is maybe having in-depth interviews with the families, just to what are they experiencing in the process of discipline, and what can we do as a partnership with them to work on this. So right, so this is an exercise just to show like how important it is to really get those insights from these other stakeholders. Each of these pieces that you all have reported can actually give, maybe that aha of like, hey, if we do this, then it really could change the trajectory for some of these kids. Looking at any one piece alone doesn't always give the whole picture. It will never give the whole picture if you're only asking one stakeholder group or looking at one piece of data. So this is important to just have that, again, 360 view, see the problem from many different angles.
Yep. And Florence, something to add in for this, the reason that I know obviously this document goes into all the different supplemental the data is because as a counselor, this will help drive your services. So versus looking at numbers and just guessing, oh, we should just do this intervention because, it works, or it's on the PBIS side, or, we really want to understand the why behind everything that's happening. So not every piece of data will need every single one of these stakeholders. It really just depends on what data you're looking at. But this right here will help you to really serve your students and your community based on not just your numbers, but what is really the need to start helping decrease or increase whatever goal that you have picked. So this is really important.
That is a great point. Yes, you do not need to plan to get this kind of data from every stakeholder group. It is, I would say, the more pervasive your problem has been, if it's something that you see year after year after year in your school, that's where you really want to get that really comprehensive view, because obviously the same thing is repeatedly happening. And so you might want to talk to families, you might want to talk to the teachers more specifically about the problem. If it's something that's kind of newer, you may not need that, because you may just, okay, we're just fixing something that's popped up right now, and we're just going to do a quick survey and try something to help the kids that are being impacted. So it really depends on your problem, but yes, absolutely. Don't be paralyzed by the data, right? I do think that bias towards action is true. Don't say, well, I'm going to wait for one more data point before doing something. No, we just, use as much information as you can get with the resources you have and try something. So one thing I really liked about this form was stepping back, and they're also making sure that we are reflecting about policies and procedures. So even though we talked extensively about the importance of that one-to-one connection with kids, that one-to-one connection with our teachers, and making them feel supported, that is that personalized piece, there's also it's never a good idea to skip this piece of looking at policies, because what policies or procedures could possibly be getting in the way of what you're trying to do. So going back to something like, I'll give an example of one that happened at a school that I was at, that they had to revisit their policy on discipline around dress code and hairstyle, things like that they were seeing extensively a lot of referrals accelerated in their school. And when they dug down, they had a policy that was pretty outdated around behavior and dress code policy, which included hairstyles and things like that, and hair color. So they kind of visited that policy to see if they could address it to include more student voice, more family voice, and rewrite it. So that is an example that I have seen. Is there any so I'll just again open it up to the chat. If you're looking at things like culture and climate or behavior, what are some policies, procedures that you can imagine looking at? Yes, homework. Yes. Huge. Grading. Yes.
I would say the extracurricular criteria is huge. We had a huge issue with that teachers only wanted students that had a 3.0. And that's not equitable, because some students struggle academically, but would really do well in an extracurricular activity. And that in turn will help boost them academically. But that was a struggle to really get my teachers to wrap their heads around that piece. But I also want to mention as well, when we were talking about interviews, don't forget to talk to your community members as well, because a lot of times we have community supports right outside of our schools, that is churches and restaurants and community centers. How are they seeing our school, and how can we better partner to support our students and our families? So just don't forget about the community resources that are out there as well.
So you all, this is Sarah Evans from the SESC Co-op. So I'm an SPDM trainer and have been for 18 years or 20, now it's 21 maybe, I don't remember. But anyway, we did a great piece right before COVID on equitable decision making. And it's an SPDM module that you can do annually with your experienced SPDM members. I don't know if they're going to update it or change it, but it was eye-opening for our councils when they started looking at their policies and realizing that there was so many things that were keeping kids from getting to participate, or homework was awful. And we had literally saw criteria where if you had lunch balances, negative lunch balances, they were not allowed to participate and things like that. So that module, you can request that module, or KDE's got it. Just reach out to SBDM, Natasha and them, and it's a really nice training that I hope. I talked to Damien, and after I did a few of them, Dr. Sweeney, and said, we need to take this on a bigger piece, because it was a great on how to write and look at your policies. So anyway, I'm glad you brought that up. That's like, you are on like one of my pedestals right now, because it's a really sore point that I've been preaching for years. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yes, and I just put it into the PowerPoint so you can, that's an awesome point, Sarah. It was just looking at equitable. So how do you make decisions on anything? I mean, really, when you talk about equity, it should be the lens that we see any policy, any procedure, any practice. And so there is this awesome module that SBDM trainers can take and the SBDM members can take. And so you'll see it right here on the screen, and they have examples here. They have the PowerPoint, and it really is stepping back and going, when we make a decision, is it like a one-person top-down decision, or are we actually bringing people in before we make a significant change to something? So I love that, because that is a system that if you do this, it impacts so many other things. So not just one policy, but the way you make decisions across the board.
And there's also something that is kind of little known, or just we never used it until COVID. There's a bylaw in your SBDMs, if they've written it, that gives the council the ability to appeal or temporarily set aside their own decisions and policies. And so when I trained it the last couple of years, I said, this is a great opportunity to be equitable, not change everything, because that's hard to do. You can't write a policy for everything. But this little bylaw says, with this particular situation, we can be more equitable, not equal, but equitable. And we've been training on that little piece for the last couple of years. And after COVID, they got it. Before COVID, they had no idea why they would ever use it. And then after COVID, they understood it. But it's really a powerful little bylaw that council can say, look, we could never have imagined this situation. Now we can help this particular situation and not have to change everything. So ask your trainers or KDE about it. It's a great bylaw the way you write it. So sorry, you're hitting my passion. Thank you.
Yeah.
No, I love it. Thank you so much. And everyone, please feel free to share what's been meaningful to you, because I think that is how I see the most powerful things happen across is cross-pollinating our good ideas. So I think that is so valuable. So thank you so much. And it is a really good connection with SBDM, because they do influence so many things.
Yes. Yeah,
So
and I'm glad you said that, Sarah, because as a school counselor, that's one of the stakeholder groups we always want to advocate to and get in front of with our data, which is what we're doing today. This is what we're seeing, which is why this document to me is so powerful, because as a counselor, you think about everything proactively you could consider with your stakeholders, your systemic focus. And I know those of you I've trained, and we've talked before about how if you're a counselor and you're looking at data, whatever you want to deliver with your services and what you want to intervene with, if it's a systemic focus issue, you need to consider what your services will look like, because you don't want to go into it with a small group or this type of intervention, but it's essentially an annual discussion about a systemic issue that is not going to change until next school year. And then your services are not going to make the impact you're hoping to see. So we really want to make sure that we are mindful of, if it's a systemic issue, then we start advocating. Absolutely. And our SBDM councils creating their policies, this is a very important stakeholder group to get in front of, to ultimately just do what's best for kids. So I'm glad you all brought that up. And another thing, keep in mind too, as we're talking through this document, we are listing all the possibilities that you could consider. So please don't think because of one goal that we've decided on or we're showing a sample of today, you have to do all these 6 or 7 different things for systemic focus. You may just do one. So please don't be overwhelmed that, oh my goodness, we have to look at all these systemic focuses for one goal. Not necessarily. It may be one focus. So again, we're just writing down samples and different ideas that you all are sharing today. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind so you're not overwhelmed with just one document.
That's a great point. It can be so overwhelming when you're like looking at your whole school or district and just thinking, oh my gosh, we have so many things we want to do and work on, and everything is so important. So what Heather's saying is really important, is to narrow down as much as you can. Think about your bandwidth and your circle. We talk about like circle of control, circle of influence. Some things you might be able to influence, but some things are really under your control. And you might want to just feel more comfortable. Hey, I don't have a million hours right now to talk to parents and collect all this data that we don't have right now. So I'm going to use existing data and kind of focus on what is under my control. And that is absolutely fine and good. So you learn every time you are implementing and following a process like this that they've outlined. Yeah, and I agree, like that CSIP, CDIP goals on SEL, mental health are super important. The required goals right now in those are pretty broad. You can actually, even though it's not required, you can build in those SEL strategies into your CSIP or your CDIP, but it's not necessarily required. So that's a really good point. So we're gonna then, so we've talked about goal setting, setting your SMART goal, and then looking at policies. The next part that ASCA's outlined is something I think Heather is going to talk about a little bit more, because they have an awesome document around student standards and mindsets and behaviors, and they connect to almost any kind of goal that you can imagine. So Heather, do you mind talking about this piece? I'll click on it as well. Heather, if you're talking, I can't hear you.
Sorry, I accidentally muted myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you could click on both links, the
Okay.
mindsets and behaviors, and then the learning objectives, we'll look at both for a few minutes. So those of you who have gotten to do some trainings with virtually in person, I know when I was a counselor, I looked at some of this, but I never really dove deep into what is here. And this is a huge resource if you've never got to see it, that your goals are already essentially there. The standards, they're there. So you don't have to recreate what you're teaching your students for large group, for small group. ASCA already has it finished. So the document, of course, with all the kids on it, these are your student standards, and they've separated them through mindsets and behaviors, and they just updated these a couple of years ago. But this will give you an idea of, as you're thinking about your goal based on your equity dashboard, whatever it is you're using, your mindsets are, what do we encourage our students just to have in their mindset? And you can see there's 6 basic statements ASCA has for our students. Then that breaks it down into their behavior. So as a school counselor, what am I doing with my services to help all of our students demonstrate each of these 3 sections? You've got your learning strategies, your self-management, and your social skills. So as you are considering your comprehensive program, this is kind of where you start of, by the time our students graduate, they really should have had all of these somewhere K through 12. Whether it's every year, it's every 2 to 3 years, it's really based on how you deliver your services and how many counselors you have, obviously. But this will give you a snapshot now that you're looking at your goal that you've already created. Which one of these matches that goal? So is it a mindset? Is it something about, do they have, do students believe that they can achieve their fullest ability with high quality results? Is it something for your goal about, if you look at self-management, Is it something about, our students need help with effective coping skills? Whatever the data is showing, if you have students really struggling with emotional regulation, that's a self-management skill and a behavior standard. As a counselor, you might want to consider either in a tier 1 setting as a classroom lesson, or that could be part of your small group if you're pulling those few kids in. So this gives you a broad overview of what helps drive your program based on that data. So you don't have to create, I know my data, I know the problem, but how do I get to the solution? What am I going to do with my kids now? So this gives you a start. And then if you'll click on the other site there, Florence, yeah. So this is your learning objectives. ASCA has already created K through 12 different goals that you all could consider to teach for your students for every mindset, every behavior, every domain for comprehensive counseling: academic, social, emotional, college, career. It's finished. You just have to search it. So for example, like Florence, if you want to click on, let's see, if you want to do like for grade level, for example, let's start there. Do 6 through 8. Let's do middle school. Okay, and if you want to look at one of the mindsets, so if we think right now we're focusing on, development of whole self, a healthy balance, so we can look at that one right there. Yeah, let's do the sense of acceptance. Let's do that one, Florence. We'll click on that, the number 2. You'll click off, yep, right there. Okay, so sense of acceptance and inclusion. So now if you'll just search that, and we'll just start there. And then we'll see, yeah. I hope the website's working. Okay, and if you scroll down, we'll see what results come up. Okay, so from that, we've gotten one result. Okay, so we've got behavior. So Florence, if you could go, I'm sorry, it'd probably easier if I would have shared my screen. Go to the behavior.
Oh, I feel like, yeah, let me unclick this, sorry.
Yes, that will get it really deep into the weeds,
Yeah.
what you don't want. Okay, now go back and try to search it again.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, I realized that.
No, you're fine. I was like,
oops, I already started.
A few more.
There's some more, yeah.
So that gives you 2. Now, I know it's only 2, but this will at least give you a start to start thinking about your goal and what you will do with your students. So the first objective, of course, talks about potential positive and negative consequences of resolving conflict. Now, that may not match anything to do with your goal of what you created, and that's okay, but that's one option. Do those students who are getting more referrals, when you look at your data, like we just talked about, is it because they are being looked at as disrespectful, they're argumentative, possibly they're fighting? So that's what we need to look at. Could this be a goal that you start considering with the group of kids to intervene with? And then the second one just talks about, do they show consideration and respect for themselves and learn how to treat others the way they want to be treated? And again, this is just for middle school. So if you've got students 6 through 8, that sample goal that Florence shared with you, is that something to work on? And as you talk to your administrators, as you talk to your teachers, if that theme keeps coming up that, well, these kids are disrespectful, they talk back, they have a tone of voice, whatever it is, that could be some things to consider. And then as you talk to your students, do they feel like they're disrespectful? And why are they maybe feel like they're disrespecting teachers? Is it a relationship issue? Is it culture? There's a lot of factors, which is why that supplemental data piece is so critical to being bigger than just a number on the dashboard. So as you look at your document that Florence is now sharing again, when you think about these students you're going to intervene with, over on the mindsets and behaviors where that arrow is, you can just pick one. If there's 2 of them, then you'll pick 2. Okay, that's that document right there. And you can do either or, a mindset or a behavior, or you can do 2 of each. Just, you figure out what you want to do, but start small. Don't overwhelm yourself and say, oh my goodness, there's 6 of these I could do. No way, just do 1. So Florence has picked, of course, mindset number 2, which, we're focused on today about the acceptance and the inclusion. And then when you look at that objective, ASCA, after we searched it, they, spit out 2 of them to us, for lack of a better word. So if those are goals, after you've talked with those other stakeholders, If you kind of see, yeah, we need to work on some students being treated like they want to be treated, or if it's something with solving conflict with violence, that would be your objective. So that's what, and you can do one, and you can do, or two. Ask or recommend one or two, because that will give you a start to then you start creating, what am I now going to do with these students? I know what my end goal is. How do we get there? So those two websites are imperative when you start looking at your data to understand as a counselor. Now you show your stakeholders, this is what I'm doing to help this issue. Not just here's my data, let's admire the problem, or it's a systemic issue that I can't change. Well, but you can start using services to help advocate for those students. And then your counseling, your tier 1 or your tier 2, start looking at what am I going to do to start making a difference with some of these numbers and listening to our students to help drive those interventions.
Right. So this is an awesome resource. And like Heather said, it does take time to kind of study it. But once you get familiar, it is so powerful, because as you select your mindset or behavior standard, that tool of being able to look for your learning objectives is so helpful, because you don't have to just write it out of the blue. They've done some of the work for you. You can also do your own, right? You can write your own, but they've provided you with a place to start and to start with the wording. So this is a great connection to your overall goal setting when you're looking at your school data. So the last piece on the form is then to convert. So I'm going to go back here and take the example that we just picked out here. So students will show consideration and respect for themselves and others as they learn to treat others the way they want to be treated. I'm just going to copy and paste it over here to this outcome goal. Convert the learning objective to a Likert scale. So what the ASCA resource is promoting, which is awesome, which is getting student voice on your learning objectives. So you can put the statement into here. Students will show consideration. I think I copied too much over. Let me try again. It's always tricky to collect, to select data to copy and paste. So let me see if I can get that. Okay, so the statement is student will show consideration and respect for themselves and others. Okay, so that's your statement, and you can convert that, and it's simple. You can you can change that to an I will show consideration. For myself, you can use something from, like for me, I'm already thinking about the quality of school climate and safety survey. So I might get kids to respond to the item that I showed earlier, which I'm just going to scroll up for a second. So sorry for the, kind of going backwards here, but I thought, when we looked at the school climate and safety survey, remember, students are already asked this question. Students from this school respect each other's differences. So you might take that item because you already know that's being collected by the state at the end of the year. You might want to give it as your own item in the fall. So you'll have fall and spring data. So you can just put that right here. That's kind of aligned to what you just said was your learning objective. So that's a quick way of selecting and writing putting a statement in there without writing your own. Someone mentioned Panorama earlier. So if you look up the organization Panorama, y'all are probably very familiar. It is associated with Castle, and they have a lot of SEL surveys that are free. They're not copyrighted. You can find items in there that could align to your goal, and they have all sorts of things, not just SEL related, but they have other items in there too related to like behaviors and things that you can lift and put in your own school. So there's a lot of options there.
Yeah, and another thing with this, Florence, is as you're looking at that, you could even break down like those questions they're specifically asked. If you didn't want to wait until spring, if let's say you're going to pull these students for a small group. Well, typically our small groups are 6 to 7 weeks. So you could take those same questions, put them in this, and do your pre-post. And I know they're
Hey,
gonna
can
see
I
them again in the
drive
spring,
away
but
off the
this
road,
would
ma'am?
be, but this would be quicker data to start seeing are your services starting to decrease or increase, whatever it is your goal says.
Guys, make sure to plug those in, please.
And I think we might have some people unmuted, so if you don't mind muting, that'd be great. So
Um,
so the last piece of this form is really your action plan, and they've kept it pretty simple. So thinking about if you are building that, fostering that respect for kids to get along with each other better and show respect, what are some activities, strategies, interventions that you can promote as a school counselor? So let's brainstorm for a minute. And again, I'm just going to type in here, they're asking for 2 examples of a direct student service and a couple of examples of indirect student services. So if people can kind of chime in the chat or unmute, and what are some activities that you might start thinking about to promote a respectful culture?
And keep in mind your direct student service, that's what you're doing with kids. So whether it's tier 1 or tier 2. So in front of kids, that's your service. Florence, would you mind to show the goal again? Would you scroll back up? To show the actual goal that was created at the very beginning of the document, the SMART goal.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, there.
Our SMART goal was around disproportionality and discipline.
Okay.
We're gonna slowly but surely head toward my office. That way my computer is down.
So what are some strategies that you may want to start with? Like just examples of either things you're doing directly with kids or things you're doing indirectly with the school.
I can go. What we usually do is we try to start with the 10-2 connection piece, where it's not really, we don't talk about behavior or anything like that. It's just building that relationship with someone in the school to kind of get to know the kid, get to know the student. So that's one that we usually start with, just because we're trying to increase our connection between staff and students.
It's great. And I also, so I put that in here. I think this is what it is, 2 minutes per day for 10 days. I've also heard people implement things, a minute that matters. So that's another, it's a little shorter, but it's that same idea of just talk to the kid, talk to the students that you may be really, and maybe multiple adults talking to the kids, depending on the issue that you're having.
And sometimes we do check and connect, but we really feel like we like the 10-2 better than that check and connect to begin with.
I love I love that idea. And then we see in the chat, Dress for Success for girls, a male mentor lunch group with male mentors from the community. Love that idea. And especially if the kids that you may be struggling with, if they don't have positive role models that look like them in school, you may need to intentionally seek out community partners to show them successful people that look like them and can help mentor. Coach groups every Wednesday. Love that. So those are direct. And then what about indirect? What are some indirect things?
Yeah, so consider the meetings you have a voice in that are advocating for these students. You know your data. So what meetings would you as a counselor sit in on to share, this is the data, this is as a counselor what I'm promoting, what I'm doing with my services? What stakeholders would you be talking to about these students?
I'm not a counselor, but I'm the school-based therapist. But I usually take that data or take what I have learned and go back to the teachers and just let them know what we are working on individually, and just kind of giving them just an update on these are things that may be harder for them during this time, or things that they're doing really well at, and maybe they need some encouragement or positive reinforcement throughout the day. And we also have response to behavior meetings where we take the data that's been collected and we kind of discuss that amongst the counselor and the principal, and just the one and some of the teachers that are in the room, and talk about how they're improving. And then, but that also gives us the opportunity to talk to, if they are getting outside therapy, to say, these are some of the struggles that they're going through, and maybe we do need to handle this child with care through some of these processes, and kind of gives more of an in-depth explanation on the behavior is not just a behavior. There's a reason for the behavior.
Mhm. Yes, there's always a reason. Thank you, Miranda. Love that. Mhm.
I was going to say, we had a lot of referrals when students first got back from the pandemic. And so we were talking to the students about, polling them about what was the issues. One of the first things we had issues with was the mask, because we had a mask mandate in the district, and the bus drivers were writing referrals constantly because students didn't have a mask. So we were trying to come up with ways to deal with, conversating with students. So I actually met with all the bus drivers to kind of see what their feel was on it. And that's not a group I would normally talk to. I will let the APs kind of deal with the referrals, but being able to sit and talk to the bus drivers about what their concern was, and talk to the students, and we kind of met in the middle about the issues of, it was too many people on the bus, it was hot, the buses were running behind, just some stuff was in my locus of control, but it did provide the bus drivers a chance to really see what was happening on the inside the school, so they could understand why students were getting on the bus feeling so frustrated. But as a counselor, it gave me an opportunity to have a different lens of saying, oh, so this is what they experienced on the bus. Because once they kind of left the school, I didn't really think about it. So think about those groups of people that we don't normally talk to. And this even includes the cafeteria ladies. I had freshmen, and y'all know freshmen, they can be a little wild sometimes. And so really working with them and trying to figure out how to bring some kind of order into the cafeteria with the freshmen, but also figuring out what the issues were, and all the freshmen complained about the cafeteria ladies not being nice. So having that conversation, like, if you could just say hello, as you putting the tray out, or smile or something, and so we started playing music in the cafeteria. And so that just kind of brought some kind of harmony and happiness. And because the students have voice and choice on the songs that we selected via Google form. And then, sometimes we let the cafeteria ladies, choose what music they want to listen to. But that is nothing I had to do. But in order to stop all the friction that was happening, as counselors, we look for those gaps. And there was a group of folks that, again, we forget about, that work with our students. So by indirectly working with them, it had a bigger impact on our students.
I know when you were talking about bus drivers, when I was principal, and then when I was director, we would do trainings with the bus drivers and do some of that SEL, even though, this was before all this, but and talk about, like you were talking about, know their names, greet them when they get on the bus, greet them when they, tell them bye, have a nice night, or whatever. And one of the things I wanted to do, and all of our district did, was cut down on the suspensions from the bus. That was like the number one thing that the bus drivers, most of them, wanted to do, was kick the kid off the bus. Well, if you put them off the bus, they can't come to school because they can't get there. So that was just one of the things that we worked on. In bus drivers, like you say, cafeteria workers, the custodians, kids really connect with them if they get the chance. I mean, I know my mom she's a retired cook from school, and kids still remember her, and but she was at a small school, so she could really connect with the kids and go out there and make sure they're eating or whatever. But yeah, I think that makes a big difference in the schools, in the kids.
I agree. Even with the extra food, we had a table where, if you didn't want the extra apple or whatnot, we put it there and, kids could grab it instead of throwing it away, because you never know. We have a lot of kids that went home hungry or were hungry once they went home. But just trying to find creative ways to build community. And even in elementary, we had a bus driver. She was the favorite. Everybody wanted to be on her bus because she, on Friday, if you were good, put your name in a drawing, and one student can sit anywhere they wanted to on the bus. And again, most kids want to sit on the back of the bus because, you hit that bump, you jump up, but how cool was it? The bus driver, she had very little referrals. You almost had to be like knocked down, drag out, fighting to get a referral on her bus because she had that control, but she built community on that bus. So again, if we can take time, as you stated, to, talk to them about some SEL practices and just communicate on how to best work with our students, you'll see a decrease, again, as we said before, that sense of belonging, decrease in the behaviors. Thank you for the example, Brianna.
Yeah, those were awesome examples. And that's why it's so powerful that ASCA has actually put on here that describe indirect, because that indirect is kind of like thinking about everything from the student experience. So bus drivers, cafeteria workers, all those interactions are so important to building that sense of belonging, and that's needed no matter what the kid you're working on, academics or behavior, so important. And then, of course, don't forget the classroom experience, so instruction. So if you're interested, we do have a larger training that's even about that piece. But when kids feel represented across the curriculum, when they are studying perspectives from individuals not like themselves. Looking at texts, looking at scientists that represent a variety, men, women, a variety of different demographics, when they start seeing all the diversity in the school, inside the classroom, outside the classroom, and then building those relationships with the adults, they feel valued and they feel seen. So we have seen schools that, go, just do those little things, learn hello in their language if they don't speak English, or ask them about the music from their country, so things like that can be really, just those little things can be really powerful to helping kids feel that belonging and feeling like everyone cares about who they are and their families. So yeah, this is awesome. It's a great discussion. And I'm going to show, let's see, the next slide here. Just when I saw the form from ASCA, I immediately thought of improvement science. If you're not familiar with that, it's just it's around like the art of school improvement. And so I love this slide just showing, because each of these pieces is covered in that ASCA form. So if you are understanding the need of a problem, you're looking at the data. And then agreeing on change is talking to your stakeholders, talking to your staff, your SPDM, define that success, have that action plan. So you're looking at, those strategies that we just talked about, that's your action plan. Define success as your SMART goal, evaluate and adjust. That's the learning objective turned into that Likert scale. You're evaluating and adjusting, then you will get that effective outcome. If you skip any step, this is what this graphic is great at. If you skip any of those steps, then you are at risk for having a misstep and you won't be as effective. So if you don't do your needs assessment with the data, you might not be focused on the right thing. Or if you don't talk to your stakeholders, like don't talk to your teachers or your administration, you might not have buy-in and consistent implementation. you don't define success. You don't know if you're getting better or worse. So you don't have those outcomes. And if everyone's doing their own action plan, it can lead to a lot of confusion. And then finally, I think we get stuck in this a lot, is not evaluating and adjusting. So that's that treadmill where you're kind of just going, but you're not really going anywhere. So just to emphasize that this is super important, like all these different steps that they've built into the form has a purpose. And so I just encourage you all to look at that template and use it for your goal setting. So there is another form that we can look at for a few minutes that ASCA has provided, and it's around school data, a summary of your school data. It kind of is a companion, I would say, to the document that we just saw. And this is really looking at school improvement. So this is as you are doing your student goals and setting out your strategies, this is kind of like the process behind the scenes. So when you're looking at like number one, who is helping obtain the data? So if you decide, hey, I want to do a survey with the kids, or I want to do a focus group, is there somebody else that can help you? Is there somebody in your school, a resource teacher or an assistant principal that might be able to be a partner in this? So it's identifying that and thinking about that, and making sure you don't feel like it's all on you, because it doesn't have to be. So who in the building can help with that? And many people, it sounds like, have worked on their school improvement plan and are part of that team. So anytime you can link it to your strategic plan or your vision and mission of your school, that will help deepen the work. So if you're not familiar with your school improvement plan, you can absolutely look. It's posted on the website by law, your school's website, or you can talk to your admin and look at that. But those goals are where your school is being evaluated. And so it's always important to look at those to align your actions. And then we've already talked about reviewing school data reports. And we've also talked about number 4. So actually looking at data from other sources from the past couple of years. The last thing we're going to talk about is comparing your data. So again, when you're in your bubble world of like, we've got our data, but we also want to look at, what does that mean when we say we're 50% on something? Is that good? Is that bad? It's hard to know what that even means unless you have some context. So ASCA is what they're saying here with number 5 is look at your data compared to other data that is available. So you might look at schools with similar populations. You might look at district averages or state averages, just to have some context of where your school falls. It's not to say it's better or worse. It's just to give you some perspective, because if you know you are way off from the average, either good or lower or higher, it gives you some insights as to where your school falls. And you might find schools that you might reach out to and say, hey, I saw your data looks amazing, and what are you doing? So it just helps with contextualizing that data. So I'll just show an example of how this can work with your quality of school climate and safety survey. So I'm going to click into, there's 2 ways to actually get this data. So there's a Kentucky School Report Card. This is your data charts and tables. And then they also provide it in Excel. So there's 2 different ways, depending on who you are as a learner in terms of data. You can choose either one. I'm going to choose the School Report Card one, just because I think more people tend to use those. So I'm going to click on that. And it's fairly straightforward to find, compare another school or another your state or your district. So this is right now, the link takes you to the state. So this is for the whole state, and you can see the state they have these dials this year. I would skip over that. That's for accountability, but I would pick the level that you're interested in. So if I'm at a middle school, I just pick that tab, and you can scroll and look at the state data. I prefer looking at tables. So I'm going to click. So they have these charts here, these color-coded charts with strongly disagree, and so on. You can also add these little filters in here. So you can look at female and male, for example, and it will automatically update your data. You can even hover a little bit and it gives you some of the numbers. If you're visual, that's a great tool. But in terms of color bar charts and things, but I actually prefer tables. So I'm going to click on table. And what you can see here is for the state, again, remember this is for the state, my school is a caring place. So that's the first question. And I know at the middle school level, 87% agreed or strongly agreed with this item. And you can scroll down and look, how did that change by these different groups? So your area of interest might be is absolutely going to be different than what I'm seeing in my home district. So you want to kind of contextualize this to your local data. But you can look at any questions like, I feel like I am part of my school. As a state at the middle school level, it's 85%. So are you as a school higher or lower than the state? And that's one way to look at this data. You can also look it up by district. And so if you're interested in looking it up by district, I'll just select a district. I'll select Jefferson as an example, and it'll change the data. It'll make it Jefferson County at the top. And then you can go back to the accountability data, which is where they're putting this. And explore data. It's kind of a lot of clicks sometimes, so it takes a little while to get used to, but basically just keep clicking on and go to explore data. That's the key. And again, you can get reading and math and all sorts of things. I'm looking at school climate. And I'm going to go to middle school. So now I have data for my district and I can say, okay, this is my school was this, and I am now looking at my district and I'm going to do a quick comparison and see if I'm lower or higher on that. And if you're familiar, I know it depends on your school. If you're familiar with other schools in your district or in another school in a neighboring district that might be like yours, you can just type in that school name and it'll show up here and you can look at that data. So it's a quick way to do comparisons across different contexts so you can explore. Again, if you have a data person in your school, this is a great, if they're not familiar with this, this is, this is being recorded. So this is a good part to show them to say, hey, you can actually compare these different levels. Right, so I'm just going to go back to, we want to wrap up with thinking about, okay, before I jump to the next piece, we want to wrap up to think about it. The school data summary will be more specific in terms of identifying like numbers of kids and what you want to accomplish with your school counseling program. So where you remember the previous one was looking at you had your learning objectives and how you were going to accomplish this. These are specific data priorities that could be helping you meet your goal. So your specific data, for example, if you're trying to address discipline, it might be, remember, we were trying to reduce out of school suspensions. So here you might actually describe, well, how are we going to do that? We're going to have 50% drop in office referrals, or we are going to have, we're going to make calls to families with good news. And those would be examples of things that you can kind of say specifically, what are some data priorities that, 80% of families are going to improve their connectedness with us, things that could help with your data goals. And this is just another way to kind of look at your whole school in parallel with your student level data.
Yeah, and real quick, Florence, when we think about the school data summary, this is typically completed before school starts, either at the end of this school year going into the next school year, because that's the data you would want to start using. And this form, for those of you who do your administrator conference, where you sit down with your principal and you go over your program for the year, your use of time data, this is the kind of the piggyback to that. So this is the data that you would show your principal based on our CSIP. These are the data priorities that within my counseling program, I can help support in our building. So not only are you building advocacy for your own services and your program and your time, but you're also connecting it to your CSIP, school-wide data. And that shows your administrators that, you are digging into that some, just to support everything they're already doing with at the school level or at the district level, whichever one, or it could be both. So thinking about your timeline as a counselor when you build your program, the school data summary comes first. And then your student outcome goal will come from this. So you'll pick not maybe all 4 of these. Obviously, they've just given some examples. You may only pick one of these for your actual student outcome goal as you go into the school year for your tier 1 or your tier 2 services.
Yeah, so that's a great point in terms of setting this up early before school starts. So you can kind of, once school starts, it can be very difficult to come back to setting goals and things. So doing this over the summer or at the end of the school year to plan for the next year is super helpful for monitoring. And so we can't underemphasize that enough, that the more you can plan, the better your data systems will be, and to have that regular rhythm with your conversations with your principal or your admin team about whatever you select and say, this is kind of our focus for this year, is really powerful to getting change to happen. We want to wrap up with bringing this back to students because, again, we talk about data so much, and we talk about action plans and strategic plans, and again, just re-emphasizing that, and you all see this every day, that this is about the student experience. And so there are 3 more strategies here as you're building your strategies, or your action plans that you can think about. One is with empathy interviews. And if Dr. Fields is on, she can talk a little bit about her experience as a counselor doing those. And then I talked a little bit about the artifacts in terms of like windows and mirrors. That's, again, kids seeing themselves throughout the school and kids seeing experiences of other individuals not like themselves. So these are what they're reading. This is what they're seeing.
So as far as empathy interviews, I was at a middle school and was asked to go in the middle of the school year to a high school. To give you some context, this high school had made the national news because of some behaviors that was happening. So they asked my principal to go. So he took me and 2 APs to this school. And so he put me in Freshman Academy, which is the academy that was doing the most. And so everything I was trying as a counselor was not working. And so decided to do empathy interviews with 360 something freshmen. Now, I will say it took some time because I interviewed every student, but the interviews were like maybe 5 minutes a piece, but some of them went longer depending on what they wanted to say. And I just wanted to know, what was some things they wanted to change? If they had like a magic wand, what would you want to change? What were some good things about the school, because we kept seeing so much bad stuff. And we had a series of questions that we asked the students. And one thing that we found out about the students, they were very honest and they wanted to be recognized. It was one of the things that they focused on was being recognized for the good. Every time we saw the news, it was, they saw the ambulance coming and They saw police cars, but we had so many good students in the school, but we concentrated so much on the behaviors that we were missing all the other good stuff. And because of this, we start recognizing students for small things, getting to class on time. It helped reduce our tardies. We played music during transition. So we had a QR code put up in the cafeteria in the hallway for students to select their music. And the fun thing about selecting the music, if you ever seen I call him 6'20" freshman boy, hear the song that he selected come on and he just like loses it in the hallway. We gave them some, guidelines. It had to be, couldn't be naughty. I mean, I like Lizzo, but Lizzo with the play instrumental. So we had to find songs, even if it was instrumental. We even brought in songs from HBCU bands just to give them a variety of songs. But allowing students voice and choice in what they wanted really helped reduce our referrals. Students started to feel recognized. And with the tardies, if you had no tardies, we celebrated you at lunch and we gave them literally a juice box, a little bag of chips, and a fun size. I mean, it's the super small ones you get at like Halloween treat. You would have thought we gave these students $5,000. Now, I'm not saying that, snacks and stuff is the best thing, but we had to start somewhere because we were so focused on everything else. And you start seeing students like, well, I want to be recognized. And you will see students running in the hallway as the music was playing because they knew the bell was about to go off and they didn't want to be late because they wanted to be recognized too. So we went from tardies to suspensions to attendance to grades and just worked our way up where students were being recognized because this is what the students wanted. And I don't know if, and that's
Jabari was the first student I covertly followed as part of her project.
Okay, and then Dr. Chang is going to show you another thing about another tool that you can use is observation and shadowing a student. But if you click on the empathy interviews, KDE has guidelines on how to do an empathy interview. That's an article on empathy interviews that you can look at. If you want to know more, please do not hesitate to reach out to me about empathy interviews. I can help you with that because it really did change the culture and the climate in that school.
Thank you, Nicole. That was our Dr. Fields. Thank you so much for sharing that because I think it is a powerful tool. And we, again, want to bring it back to empathy interviews can really uncover things that you may not have realized in the experience of students or families, and it can help illuminate a problem that could be longstanding. So the very last thing we want to just show you is a video. It's a very short video, and it's just around shadowing a student. These are two really good resources that you can find on Amazon, just one on street data and one on coaching for equity. These are great books to, again, elevate voice of your students and educators. So I'm going to play this and then we will wrap up.
Jabari was the first student I covertly followed as part of her project to better understand the inequities at the middle school where I was a coach. Our student achievement data, particularly for African-American students, had raised red flags in our district, and our school's leaders were asked to do something about it. At our instructional leadership meeting, I mused over what we could learn by shadowing a student for the day. Jabari was nominated as a candidate for this inquiry because he was a pretty good kid. We wanted to understand the experience of average students to start with. Not the outliers or those who are really struggling, but the average kids who should have been doing much better than they were. I lurked outside our school on a chilly January morning, and when I saw Jabari's mom drop him off, I commenced my project. Wearing jeans and a fleece, carrying a backpack, and only about 5 feet tall, I easily blended in with the students. I don't think Jabari ever noticed that I was following him as he went to his classes and lunch, and then got on the city bus after dismissal. What I observed that day will never leave me. Using the teacher-to-student interaction tracker, I noted every exchange an adult had with Jabari. Of the interactions that I noted, 68% were in the negative category, 20% were neutral, and 12% were positive. Here's a sample of what I heard. Take your hoodie off, young ma'am. Hands by your side as you walk these halls. Sit up straight, please. 2 minutes is enough time for you to take out your math book. I asked for an inside voice. Hoodie down. We walk in these halls. Your eyes should be tracking me. The overwhelming majority of comments that were made to Jabari by an adult focused on his body and behavior. Jabari didn't seem bothered by the comments. He often did what he was asked. Although when the dean told him to walk in the halls, he said, I am, which he was. The dean then responded with, don't talk back to me, young man, or you'll be in the office. Jabari just rolled his eyes and kept on walking. Of the 14 different adults who interacted with Jabari that day, only one expressed care. Nice to see you today, Jabari, she said. Very little was said about his thinking, writing, reading, or anything related to his academics. He was never called on or praised. By the end of the day, I was on the verge of attacking the next adult who made a critical, unkind comment to Jabari. At the next IoT meeting, I presented the transcript of what I'd heard. Team members were surprised and defensive. Some tried to dismiss the data with statements like, that was just one day. That's not representative of what our students experience. I pushed back and argued, even if it was just one day, it was problematic. And I asked how much data like this I need to collect before we accepted that the culture at our school was unwelcoming and hostile to kids. One teacher felt like this data validated what staff had been asked to do when students were walking in the halls. I thought we were supposed to say these things to kids, she said. I got frustrated and accused everyone of perpetuating racism and contributing to the high dropout rates in our district. No wonder Black boys hate school, I said. I wish I had more refined communication skills to share what I had observed.
Such a powerful tool to shadow students. I know we've had that. I've had experience with administrators who've done that and, rode the bus, went to the cafeteria, ate the lunch food, and you always learn. And a lot of the times the experiences may not be as extreme as Jabari's, but it can be still something you learn from. Things like, man, kids sit all day. No wonder they're fidgety by fifth period, all the way to nobody talked to this kid today. Like nobody called on her, nobody. So you see all sorts of things just by thinking, by just shadowing. And so we encourage you to think about that as a strategy. Any adult can participate in that, and it can be eye-opening. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Heather, and our Dr. Fields and I have our contacts in the PowerPoint, so you can reach out to us at any point.
Hey, Heather, can I say something? This is Susan.
Yes, go ahead.
Going back to, I think just where they said, I thought we were supposed to say that. I think that's one thing missed in PBIS. It's how we say it. So can I remind a student to walk in the hallway? Sure, but I can remind them by acknowledging the kiddos who are doing it right. And so I think sometimes we have to teach our staff of how we say it, because yeah, do we want to remind them to walk in the hallway, but it's how we're doing it. So that's a perfect example of, that breaks my heart. So thank you for sharing that. But just how do we get staff to see it's how we're saying it, right? Like, yeah, we want to remind them, but it's how we say it that can have such an impact. Like just by tweaking it a little can have a totally different impact on that student.
Yeah. So
just wanted to share that little tidbit.
Yeah, I think it does, Susan. You're exactly right. I know I had a principal once. She modeled how we should talk to kids and staff. Everywhere you went, she was in the hallways handing out, for PBIS, of course, you had your tickets if you do that with that part. But everywhere you went, no matter what day she was having, what was happening, because as a counselor, typically we know kind of if it's crazy happening, it didn't matter. She would talk to kids and staff and model it for all of us, no matter what kid it was, no matter what had just happened. And she would really target some staff who typically tended to be I guess, the more negative ones or the more even gossipy ones in the hallway, things like that, she would break that apart immediately and go and just model how to be respectful, tone of voice, praising kids specifically, not just good job, but specifically praising kids. And it really, kind of just as just floated in our staff, and that really helped a lot of our behaviors and things like that to decrease because of just what she did. And it was her expectation. If we were doing the 4-to-1 for PBIS, she did it for us. And we knew what was expected because it came from the top. And if you really didn't buy into it, you probably weren't at the school very long, to be honest. So, because it's what's best for kids and our staff. So yeah, so I'm glad you I'm glad you said that. Yep. All right, well, do you all have any other questions or comments? We've got like 3 minutes left. If you want to put anything in the chat, you are more than welcome to. Anything you want to ask of Florence and Nicole about anything they've touched on today? Oh, you're getting some shout outs, girls. Okay. Well, our information is on the PowerPoint, which you have in the chat. Throughout the co-ops, you all will be getting the resource document similar to every other cadre we've ever had. The recording will be on there in probably a few days. So I think last time it took about a week to get it through editing to make sure everything was okay, but that link will be on there. So if you have other colleagues who could not join today, you are more than welcome to share that recording with them. It will be on the KDE Comprehensive School Counseling site as well. But again, as you start looking at this work, using some of your ASCA recommended documents, please feel free to reach out to us. We will jump on a Zoom with you really fast. We would love to see examples and ideas of what you're implementing based on our presentation today. So always feel free to send us pictures or any little anecdotes, because we would love to include it in our newsletters and to shout you all out for all the hard work you do. So again, thank you all for joining today. I know with December, I know your schools are crazy right now, but we really appreciate it. And again, just feel free to reach out for us to anything. And we hope to see you back here February 7th for our school counselors for MTSS training all day, which will be very exciting. So, again, reach out for anything you all need. And thanks for coming today.